Well, this doesn't happen very often. I've covered plenty of shows that intensely perv on their underage characters, but not nearly as many that I wanted to continue watching regardless. I'd like to thank my wonderful patron Data52 as well as Ave, David Frog, Edel Gaspirat, and 2160 for suggesting my dress-up darling for Red Hot Go. If there's a show, game or movie you'd like me to give a shot, let me know in the comments. My dress-up darling was one of the darlings of the winter 2022 season, airing while I was distracted with another show. Something that surprised me was just how effective the introduction was. In the span of a few minutes, we learn that our protagonist, Goro, is obsessed with Hina dolls, has been ostracized for this passion, and lives with his grandfather as his parents are out of the picture. All of this is conveyed through visuals and indirect dialogue. I wondered at first if my standards had slipped in the few months I wasn't doing Red Hot Go. But then we get an exposition scene between Goro and his grandfather, and I swiftly remembered the way most anime do setup. This scene isn't terrible by any means. There are shows I love that have delivered exposition far clumsier than this. It's just a shame to go from such masterful storytelling to the usual grind. The exposition in episode 1 is a little all over the place. There's a scene where the female lead, Kitagawa, has a monologue about how Goro needs to not let himself be used, and it's a nice sentiment, but it doesn't really go anywhere in the early show. They probably could have made their point in a more subtle way and brought it up more directly if/when it ever gets called back to. Kitagawa's role in the story is odd all around until she enters the sewing room. Her introduction has her falling and nearly braining herself on Goro's desk. Usually an introduction like this would suggest that the character is clumsy, but if that's the case, it doesn't come up again. I do like her absolute refusal to tolerate anyone speaking ill of the things she is passionate about. Partly because I'm always down to see a negging attempt backfire, but also because it gives her actual character. The sewing room scene is where it all comes together. Goro and Kitagawa unite, find camaraderie in their niche interests, and find a point where they overlap. I love this. I love that these two characters can find common ground between their interests and bond over them. As someone with niche interests, I understand that finding common ground between passions is important. I also love that this interaction teaches Goro definitively that his love of Hina dolls does not condemn him to a life of social isolation, even if his obsession with them can be a little unsettling. We also learn that Kitagawa is just as big a pervert as the showrunners are. Yeah, you all saw this one coming from a mile away. The show perv panders hard, like to the point that it'll add curves to the panty shots. The argument could be made that this is all in context and therefore completely fine, but I have a few things to say about that. First of all, yes, some of the perv pandering is somewhat contextual, especially given the protagonist's lack of social skills and his obvious attraction to Kitagawa. But what works against it is how selective the perv pandering is. Take the sewing room scene. We get a good look up Kitagawa's skirt when she turns once, but when she later jumps around the room in glee, nothing of the sort happens. Kitagawa teasing Goro with her body is fine because she has some agency over those situations, but why is it that the scene about getting body measurements is far pervier than a scene where Kitagawa shows Goro her underwear? This, combined with the jumping example from earlier, shows that the perv pandering has far less to do with context than artistic intent, and the intent seems to be to perv on this high schooler at least once per episode. Speaking of the body measurement scene, I wish it would just pick a lane. Goro starts off flustered and embarrassed, which is fine, but he eventually realizes how important this is to Kitagawa and gets serious. A better scene would either delay that moment until they got all the flustered moments out of the way, or find another point of conflict. Flip-flopping between flustered and fearless is just weak storytelling. I will admit that the scene where Goro's grandfather walks in on him playing that porn game intently and taking notes got a good chuckle out of me, as did the scene where Goro and Kitagawa talked about the game in public and drew a few stares. Ultimately, the first 3 episodes end with Kitagawa expressing admiration that she has someone to get passionate over cosplay with, and introducing what I assume is the next episode's conflict. On paper, My Dress Up Darling should be a show that repulses me. The often completely superfluous perv pandering, the widely ranging quality of exposition, and a few story beats that come off as generic and uninspired. But I can't help but be enamored with this show. Perhaps it's the characterization of our leading duo, or the passion they have for their hobbies, or the clever way that those passions intersect. I'm not sure what's keeping me hooked to this show, but I'll be sticking around to find out. From ice cold to red hot, I give My Dress Up Darling a rating of boiling. As long as the priority remains the duo's passions and relationships over everything else, I think I'll be sticking with this one. That's all for this episode of Red Hot Go. I'd like to thank my patrons: Orion Tran, Lars Espen, Data52, Jaman5, Lemon Shark, Pixcalibur, Alberto Cruz, Tyler Bennett, Tenka, Jeremy Pashik, Fireclaw, Soren, Christopher Wang, Will, Mario, Luke Stewart, Ignacio, and Aidan Nielsen. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.